Welcome, everybody, to the CFF List Week 8 Waiver Watch Draft. I'm Jay Mill. I got my partner, Willie B, as usual. What's up, Willie? How you doing?
I'm doing okay.
Getting through our technical difficulties. It's always one different one after another, but we will keep pushing through. It's too late to not push through. We're in what we're calling the semifinal rounds of our guest drafters. We've got two of the top six that have been kind enough to rejoin us and spend part of their Sunday evening helping you guys out with the picks that can make the biggest difference for week 8. I think Kyle ended up in fifth the last time he was here. That's our guy Kyle at KL_fantasy. We'll get a little bit of a deeper introduction later. And we've got Chris Moxley, who will talk about losing his number one seeding thanks to Nino, who we'll talk about here in just a minute. But yeah, Chris and Kyle, welcome. And thanks a lot for coming back. I know it's time consuming sometimes when we do a few of these a week, or even just to do one a week is a little bit out of the ordinary for some. So thanks for coming back, guys. All right, Willie, I told you that for this recording I should probably show up with a bag on my head because as people can see on the screen, uh, I ended up with a season low this week of 34 points, maybe a 2 year low since we've had guest pickers. So I probably really should have, worn something to cover my face. The only reason I didn't is because the three out of the four previous weeks, I scored over 100. So I feel like I still have some redeeming qualities and have proven to have some knowledge to help people in some capacity. And I feel a little bit ripped off because nobody knew the EJ Warner injury was even existed. So I got caught out there with EJ Warner as my quarterback after his big 40 plus points the week before. So in my mind, I got 54 points, not 34 points, because I'm giving myself 24 quarterback.
Well, unfortunately, the score is the score. So, yeah, you have overtaken the worst ever by a Sooner CFF, and I'm sure he's happy about that.
But
Uh,
yeah,
but
you really were unkind to him, to making sure he knew he had the lowest score up until this point.
Yeah, no, but we always like having Tony on the show, so I'm sure he's very happy to give up that distinction.
All right. Well, and
So.
then we're recording with him in 2 weeks, so we'll be able to talk to him about how it feels. I'll be able to relate to him as far as the feeling of being the lowest performer. But we'll do I'll touch on mine, which I'll do quick, so then maybe I could cover Nino's as well, and let you go here in the middle. But like I mentioned, the big disappointment was EJ Warner not even suiting up in what I thought was going to be kind of a pretty big shootout versus North Texas. And speaking of North Texas, Ayo Adii kind of let me down. I mean, on paper, it didn't look like he had a horrible game. He had 60 plus yards, but that's all I got was 6 points for the 60 yards. Ron Cook Jr., very similar, got me 9 points, but no touchdown. So I'm just kind of left with, an under 10 performance there, which guys can now see. We're color coded. So my whole column is red, which is not good. And the deeper the red, the worse the score. So I've got a lot of blood reds here. Eric McAllister, after two really good weeks, he messed the bed up. And Andrew Armstrong, you guys warned me, Mr. 17 or 18 points guaranteed all season against anybody. You and Nino proved to be right when you laughed at me for taking him against Alabama. But interestingly, he was my highest performer at 11 points, rounding up.
Wow.
And then, Jake Johnson's brother forgot that he was on the team apparently, and he only got two. So, I'm going to leave it at that. I'll let you jump into your adequate performance, we'll say. You didn't quite hit the 90, but you were at 85. So you were in the range that I would say is very helpful and still adequate, but not spectacular, Willie. What do you think?
Yeah, no, took a chance, so I won't be doing the one hit wonder with Sean Brown. Very disappointed there. I mean, he was 1% on at the time, so I will definitely be steering clear of the guys who are, the kind of like a flash in the pan. They need to prove that they can do it, I guess,
Right.
even though we're trying to stay under, the 30% threshold. But
Right.
yeah, definitely a big disappointment. Jaden Thomas, looks like UNLV is splitting between three backs, which is going to be unfortunate for him. because I just don't see him doing what I thought he would do, which was could probably give me about 15 points. It turned out to be 2.2. So, and then
Hmm.
also Tyree Shelton, kind of that same thing, and that was a little bit of a letdown, even though he had 10 and a half.
Right,
He's usually, I think around 15, 16, something like that. So
right,
I just thought they'd do much better against Middle Tennessee State.
right. Yeah, but you had the really good performance by Jordan McLeod from JMU with 24. We're looking for for those who are just tuning in, it's worth repeating. 90 is usually the goal. We're looking for 20 from a quarterback, at least 15 from our running backs and wide receivers, and 10 from the tight ends. So if you hit those thresholds, we're putting the score in green and saying you did a good job. If you're a little below, you get a light red. If you get way below that, you get the dark red, like my whole column, like we mentioned. But yeah, I think he did great, and Royals is really just taking over that team from Terrell Vaughn. So I thought maybe he'd fall back a little bit, but it seems like defenses are now, focused on Vaughn and leaving Royals wide open. So it'll be interesting to see if defenses adjust one more time and realize they're both actually very good. So,
Yeah, no, I don't think they will. I think I think he's actually legit, and
right.
I didn't look closely, but I would hope that he's not available this week.
Yeah, I think he is finally over. He was at 28 last week. I'd be shocked. I
Right,
mean,
right.
he didn't show up on my
Is
list
that like,
when I was scanning through. Um,
I think he's
but
at
yeah, let's
45
give
now.
Okay,
45%.
good.
Okay, thanks, Kyle.
Nice, nice.
But let's not short Nino here. Let's give him his just due. As we mentioned in the opening, he overtook Chris Moxley, our guest today, for the number one spot out of the guest drafters so far. He ended up with 133, which by my notes is the third best in the past 2 years. Which we've been doing this with guests for 2 years. We did it by ourselves in year one. He got 133. Moxley had a really impressive 123, which was the seventh best all time. So he's still coming in at number two. Um, and then as far as well, I think Kyle, you ended up with 91.7 or something in that range. So we've got two guys that seem to know what they're doing here. We'll see if they can do it again. But as far as Nino and his number one spot, obviously I think a lot of us have had our eyes on Pavia, but apparently, like the rest of the CFF world, we haven't been taking him in the waiver draft often, and he's still hovering around 20% as of last week with kind of the mass market there of CFF owners. So I have a feeling you're going to see him skyrocket this week. But the other big one was Joey Hobart from Texas State. Like, this kid's really caught fire, and I think he's had multiple games here with over 20 points. I think three in a row. Where he's just been the man. We knew the Texas State offense was going to be great, but we didn't necessarily know who wide receiver one would be. But I think it's clear right now. And then lastly, I'll just focus in on Trey Knox, who he kind of pinpointed as a legitimate target that was coming on for Rattler.
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 Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, with Trey Knox, really proving, to not be a fluke there at tight end with his 19. And really, with his only low score being L.J. Martin, who was still fairly respectable with almost 12 points from BYU. But props to you, Nino. We'll have you back hopefully next week as part of the six that have made it back. And then from this group of six, what we'd like to do is see if the top two guys would join us for what we'll call a championship round. Hopefully nobody gets in by default because somebody can't make it, and the top two guys from these last six, can join us in week 11 for the grand finale there. But with that said, let's get into a little bit more on who's drafting with us today. They happened to draft the same week. I think it was week 2. Chris and Kyle joined us, turned in some really good performances, as we mentioned. Chris Moxley, he does a lot of work over at Canton to Canton. We were talking kind of pre-show. He's spending a lot of time, helping people figure out what they should be spending their money on as far as bets go over at the Better Network. That's at Better Network. And seems to be catching a lot of attention for his FCS and smaller school picks, Chris. So where's that coming from? Have you always focused on those, or you just figured out it's a little bit easier to beat the system with those small school games?
I've always had a
soft spot for smaller school football programs. I just like seeing those dudes succeed. But
Hmm.
yeah, it's the softest market when we're talking about betting. So I think there's a lot of value at those openers. So I've been watching a lot of Ivy League football this year, which
Okay, all right. So
it's always good time.
and he made a good point. Normally, the guys in Vegas will catch up through the course of the week. So if you're going to get those bets in, find Chris, see who he's putting his money on early in the week when the line comes out, or otherwise by Wednesday it's going to be too late. And then we've got Kyle. That's at KL_fantasy. He's doing work over at the Undroppables. He's also hosting over at University FF. Um, Kyle, how's the season going for you overall? I know we seems like we're in about the same amount of leagues. The six that we both said we've got to actually set lineups on this season. How's everything going for you? And what have you been producing on a week to week basis? Just to remind everybody.
I think I'm only below 500 in one league right now in terms of
Nice.
college. So
Ooh.
um,
Nice.
definitely spent some NFL assets in some campus to Canton leagues to like boost up those CFF rosters, but
Right.
they're looking good for the most part.
Okay. All right. And then during the week, just remind us, what you're doing on a regular basis.
You can find me on YouTube on the Devi Dose or EK Films with Eric Courts, EK Baller, usually Monday nights and Thursday nights.
Nice, nice. All right, so we'll tune in for that. And with that, we used my favorite site, random.org, to generate the list again here. I am not a paid endorser of that site, but I love to use them. And as it turns out, I get the first pick, which means I will also get the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, eighth pick. Because we do this in a snake format. We're going to all take one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, and one tight end, and they must be under 30%. It's week 8, so there's a lot more guys over 30% that we can't take anymore. There's a few guys that disappeared, particularly this week. Uh, Running back seems to have been the slimmest, and I think I made the mistake last week of going wide receiver. Well, I made a mistake all across the board last week, um, but there's one running back that really caught my attention that I'm going to kick this thing off with. I've got him in a couple of leagues. I know Willie B has him in a couple of leagues, and that's Mekhi Hughes from Tulane. He's going up against North Texas this week, which is should be a very beneficial matchup. According to Fantrax, they're 133 against the run, or I'm sorry, against running backs. The Fantrax ranking shows you the ranking versus position. And let's not be fooled by his 13.1. He's had 19 and 26 in back-to-back weeks. And that's because his carries have increased dramatically. He's up to 22 and 26 carries over the last 2 weeks in both games, over 120 yards. And he's getting in the end zone. So Tulane has seemed to focus on him when it comes to being the primary ball carrier. I know when we started the season, we said stay away from Tulane's running backs because it was very messy with 4 potential guys, including 2 freshmen. It looks like Mekhi Hughes is the guy. And I think he's the standout among this group. So, Willie, let's see what you got to follow that up.
All right. Yeah, I want to give a shout out to Chris Moxley. I know we didn't touch base on his earlier performance, but he had before Nino, he had the top for the year at 123.5. So just wanted to give you that shout, give you your props on that.
And
So
while we're doing that, you reminded me of something. I was going to give her a similar shout out, and I thought you were going to go here with it. Thanks to you, Chris, I did pick up Zion Chris in a few leagues, and he's helped me tremendously.
There we go.
You were the first guy I heard mention him, and to be on top of that, and he's actually helped me out quite a bit. And I think he was a great long-term pickup, not just for the week that you grabbed him.
That's what we're trying to do here, right?
Exactly, and it really worked.
yeah.
All
And
right.
so with that, I'm going to do a little gamesmanship here, and we're going to go with a guy who should not be 28% owned, but we're going to go Holden Willis, but we're going to put him at the wide receiver spot since he does have that dual.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we're going to put him in. He's just legit and consistent. I mean, that's just what I like as far as the numbers. Even when he doesn't have the touchdown, he's still going to give you that 13, 13 and a half, which is what you want. And so this late, I want that out of one of these receivers. I did not have that last week, so I want to get that this week.
Yeah, so I'm curious if are you saying by putting him at wide receiver instead of tight end, you think that the wide receiver options are just thinning out, and so you've got some better options there at tight end that you think are better than what you would end up finding as a second receiver here this week?
Right. That's
Okay.
that's what I'm saying.
Chris, and then Kyle, you'll go back to back. Don't forget. So, but yeah, Chris, what position are you going to lean towards here?
Mekhi Hughes was definitely the number one guy on my list. Really like that matchup for him. So great pick there. But I'm also going to go running back because I think that is the thinnest position this week.
Okay.
I'm going to go Liberty running back Quentin Cooley.
There you go. 9%
rostered. They get Middle Tennessee State this week. They had a really strong defense against the run, but they hadn't really played any good rushing teams. And when they had been drastically exposed. Tulane, who is not a good running team, ran all over them with the aforementioned Mekhi Hughes. I like Cooley this week. Liberty is a 13.5, 14-point favorite. I think that he's going to get a lot of run. And I'm just trying to lock up a position early that I think is pretty thin.
Yeah, and he's probably a guy I should have taken last week because he was available, and I think we all passed on him. But I think against Middle Tennessee, that's a great play, and he had 28 carries last week, so he's another guy that's kind of shaped up to be the clear running back one.
I'll take a running back as well. I do agree that running back's going to be tough. And I'm going to go with Terrion Stewart, the Bowling Green running back. Playing against Akron. Akron's one of the worst run defenses in the country. Stewart's coming off 25 attempts against Buffalo last week, had 26 against Georgia Tech 3 weeks ago. I think if Bowling Green is able to win this game and lead against Akron, he'll be in that 20 to 30 attempt range once again. So going there with my first pick, I will say you guys went like 3 straight snipes on me. I think I picked fourth last time. The same thing happened. So
yeah, you did have that elbow last time.
All 3 guys I wanted. I was really hoping for Willis.
Yeah, and then Willie with the interesting strategy of putting him at receiver too. That one kind of threw me off, but I think that's what he was trying to do is just make us all
definitely. I was trying to do that for sure.
Just throw us off.
All right, what's the backup plan, Kyle?
Here's what I think I'll take. I'll take Coastal Carolina running back Braden Bennett as my other pick. Chris is upset. I'm sorry. Playing against Arkansas State, another horrible run defense. So I like that matchup a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was on my short list, and I sound like a broken record, but again, that's another school that really stood out as one you didn't want to go near as far as running backs when the season started. That you had Richard Reese, you had Bennett, you had the third guy, I forget his name now, but you had no clue which way Coastal was going to go with 3 guys that were all really good, and Bennett's proven to be their guy. 15 carries in each of the last 2 was my note on him, and along with 22.7 and 20.7 in the last 2 weeks. So. It looks like that's the way they're leaning. With that, let's see who you got next, Chris. We're going to keep this running back train rolling.
I'm really bummed because the next 2 on my list were Stewart and Bennett, and I thought I would get one of them. And I mean, I've been harping on how I think important it is to get a running back. I really wanted to do so here, but I got a couple, and I think now that I have Cooley, who I really like, I'm going to pivot a little bit. Give me Shimon Mateer, the tight end for Cincinnati.
Nice.
He's come on in the last 2 weeks a little bit. He's got 10 targets over the last 2. I think this is a really nice matchup against Baylor. We know that he's a really, really solid athlete, a guy that we've targeted for a couple of years now, hoping to get production out of. I think it's starting to come. He's being used heavily in the red zone. He has, if he doesn't have 3 touchdowns, he at least has 2 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. So Medayer is a guy that I have. I think tight end is kind of thin this week. Tight end's always thin. Yeah, he's 3 touchdowns his last 2 games. So I don't want to zero at this position at the end of the day. That's my big thing. I want a guy who's going to get me like 10 points, and I think Medayer is a guy who can do that.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, that was a good pick.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a little bit of a throwback name to last year. I know everybody was kind of hyping him up in the preseason. He disappeared on us, and is just now returning. It's even interesting that he didn't really start off this year too hot, but mid-season now it seems like he's getting into form, and could be a longer-term solution beyond this week as well. So good pick, Willie.
All right. So with that, I better get the 2 guys that I was wanting to. Otherwise, that Holden Willis is not going to hold up. So let me make sure he is still under. I know he was when I printed this out. Yeah. So we're going to go Trey Knox.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
They have, 26%. They play at Missouri this week. Jeremy, if you can, let's see, fix that.
Yep.
It fixed it itself. All right. So he's been fairly consistent the last few weeks. He's 15.3, 12.1, and then 19. Last week he caught all of his 8 targets and a score. So we're hoping that he can kind of keep that going against Missouri, who is just middling against the pass.
All right. Okay, now the Willis at receiver thing makes a little more sense. So okay.
Those were the 3 players that I was considering at tight end: Willis, Knox, and Medayer. By the way, I didn't have it deeper than that.
Okay, yeah, and you needed 4. You only needed 4 on your list, but you only went 3. You rolled the dice and went 3, and then Willie took 2 of them. So fortunately, I've got others. But you guys have taken 2 of the 4 that I had on my list. Actually, I take that back. I did like you, Chris. I've only got 3 on my list as well, but I'm going to roll the dice a little bit and hope that I got one that's deep enough that others won't take him. I'm going to go wide receiver here with a guy I really like out of Memphis, which is Rock Taylor. And he's 10% owned. They're playing against UAB, who's just been horrendous on defense. And he's another guy who's kind of outplayed his season-long average in the last couple of games. He's averaging 16.2 in the season, but if you look at his last 4, that's bumped up to 19.5, which has come from games of 18, 21, 21, and 18 as far as points go. Last week in particular, he had 7 for 108, so he would have got you 17 points even without getting a touchdown, and he's had over 103 games in a row. So I like my guy Rock Taylor there at wide receiver.
Great pick. Great pick.
Thank you. Willie, what do you think? Great pick.
I don't think it's terrible. I mean, obviously, I mean, he wasn't on my list of guys to take, but looking at his stats, I mean, he's legit. So,
and I did forget to mention this. Willie's attitude changes once he takes the lead. He's now leading for the season over me. He's averaging 93.7 a game, and I'm only averaging 92.2. So, he's feeling like he's more in control and smarter than me.
We gotta tell us how you really feel, moment.
Right. Well, he's taking the Peyton Manning role in this podcast versus the Eli Manning role.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he is a legit scorer. So I was like I say, even when he does not score his touchdowns, the last 4 weeks he's had 2 touchdowns, but the ones he doesn't, he had 21.3 and then 17.8. You cannot beat that, when the guy does not have a touchdown. So
right. Well, the next guy, I have a feeling is going to be on all of your lists. He was really off of my radar, even though he's had already had 2 pretty spectacular weeks, which is Noah Smith from Sam Houston at wide receiver. That's who I'm going to follow up here. I'm going to go back-to-back wide receivers. I had mentioned a couple weeks ago that I really hadn't seen anybody from Sam Houston on anybody's rosters. We thought Gentry, the running back at that point, might start to emerge because he had a 20-plus carry game at running back. But Noah Smith has turned out to be the guy that Sam Houston is going to be Sam Houston's CFF darling. Um, he's had 42 targets in the last 3 games, guys, um, and 27, 23, and 26 points in the last 3 weeks. So again, another guy you got to completely throw out his points per game average for the season, which is 15-1, and just look at the last 3 where he's averaging like 25 points a game in the last 3. And they're playing FIU this week, so if you're ever going to want to play Noah Smith, I think it's this week against FIU. So I'm going to get the wide receivers finished off with him.
Yeah, that's another good pick. I mean, just because, like I say, he wasn't on my list doesn't mean I don't think it was a good pick. So,
All right.
I do like that though. I do like that.
All right. Well, I know you're looking at your next pick because you didn't type in his name, so that tells me you're hard at work figuring out your next pick. So
Well,
go ahead.
yeah, I mean, because we were talking about this guy before.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, and I kind of steered away from it only because of the matchup.
Mm-hmm.
But now that I look at it, I mean, I may have to go with him before you guys. Let me make sure before I. Let's see. No, I'm gonna stick to my guys. I'm gonna stick to my guys.
All right.
But I am going to go quarterback now. We're going to go Cooper Legas from Utah State.
Okay.
Let's make sure. Hopefully he's that guy's still unavailable. He's been pretty good these last few weeks. I know the starter was out with a concussion, but he has 10 touchdowns the last 3 weeks, 22.8, 29.5, and then he had 30.8 in that loss that they had to Fresno. That was kind of incredible, that game. But I think he should do fairly well. They have San Jose State, who is like toward the bottom in passing. So
Mm-hmm.
look for Legas to hopefully get me in that 25 range. And he is 7% rostered also.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. He's more of a known name, I would think. At least among Group of 5 guys, he's been around a while, and you know, I'm just thinking about the 2 receiver he's got that are both doing really spectacular, which are Vaughn and Royals. So somebody's got to be throwing him the ball, and it's Legas, however you say it. So yeah, that's pretty good matchup. Good job. Okay, I'll give you your props on that one. And Chris, coming back around to you. Let's see if you get your wide receiver here.
I'm thinking I might not. Well, I'm trying to figure out what makes the most sense in terms of roster construction.
Draft. This is the fun of the waiver draft, is trying to figure out if somebody will wait. Like any draft, this is the funnest part of any fantasy league, is the drafting. So we get to do it every week here.
I have 3 running backs left that I really like, and there's only 3 running back spots, so I think I can wait on that position.
Okay.
No,
by deductive reasoning, you'll get one of the 3. It looks like.
So I feel like I probably do need to go wide receiver, and that tells me that, and I'm gonna butcher this dude's name. Usually, I'm pretty good with names.
Okay.
Kelly Akarai.
Yeah. I
UTEP wide receiver.
Akari. Yeah,
Akari?
I think it's Akari.
Is that it?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you must have heard a broadcast. I haven't heard him mentioned by anyone.
Yeah. I figured we were going to talk about him at some point, so I wanted to make sure that J Mill wasn't the one butchering it. But yes, they were calling him Akari.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah, good to know. I watched that game on mute, so. But yeah, that was a huge breakout game for him. Just an awesome performance in. It was a plus matchup, but it was a backup quarterback. 8 receptions, 223 yards, 2 touchdowns. It sounds like their leading wide receiver, Tyron Smith, might sit out longer than anticipated. So I think he's stepping to this de facto wide receiver 1 role. And they get New Mexico this week, and I'm not sure New Mexico is any good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
state.
New Mexico State, sorry.
Yeah. I agree. And 21 targets in the last 2 weeks. So I think you're right. Yeah, he's become kind of the new wide receiver 1 there. I didn't realize Tyron Smith was out. Okay, so that all makes sense now.
Yeah, it sounds like there's, not to get in the weeds on this, but there's rumors that he might sit out the season to preserve a red shirt. Not sure how true that is, but
it's based on his off-season pattern. It seems like it probably is true. I mean, the fact that he went to A&M and then came back, and he's probably, who knows? Your version of what he's doing it for doesn't surprise me based on what happened over the summer.
Yeah, which just gives Kelly Akari like way more incentive to pick him up. I mean, he's unrostered 96% of leagues. I think this is a guy that can really help you down the stretch, even if the quarterback play is a little suspect, because I don't think Gavin Hardison's coming back last week. But this fourth stringer, he's got the goods. He played awesome last week.
Right, and that, like you were saying, yeah, that schedule looks pretty nice. They do have the bye week 11, but other than that, it should be kind of smooth sailing.
Yep. All right.
All right. I am going to take a player from South Florida. South Florida absolutely crapped the bed last week against Florida Atlantic, but they come into a bounce back game against UConn this week, and I think Byron Brown and company will do that. So I will take his wide receiver 1, Sean Atkins, with this pick. He's been pretty solid all around this season. I mean, Naeem Simmons has been the guy who gets the higher highs, but Atkins, a good floor, and I think this could be a big game for him against one of the worst passing defenses in the country.
Yeah,
and then
he's good.
With my second pick, I think I'm going to just wait on tight end and probably do that near the end. But I will take a guy that really helped Chris during the last recording we did, and that is UL Lafayette quarterback Zion Chris.
Still,
I mean,
sitting
Chris
there
mentioned
for
him in week
no
2,
reason.
and he's still only at 17%. So
Yeah, that's really nuts.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and what's funny about both of your picks is that 2 weeks ago I mentioned it was sinful that Sean Atkins was only at 1%. He's still only up to 12%, and here we are weeks after you and Chris, 5 weeks later, and Zion Chris is still here also. But people are not. I don't know. Maybe this is why you're over 500 in all of your leagues but one there, Kyle. Sometimes people just jump in and feel like the roster is going to take care of itself. But that's where you guys watching can take advantage.
Right. Nice pick.
Yep. Chris was on Zion. Chris was still on. He's one of my 5 that I had this week. So, which is why I haven't jumped that quarterback yet.
Yep, Milo's as well for sure.
Yep. All right, good job, Kyle. Chris, just that quick. It's back to you.
I think there's a handful of receivers that I can wait on here. I got a deep quarterback room as well that I think I can wait on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not forced to take running back, so I feel like I'm in a good position to kind of go where I want to, and I think I do want to go running back.
Okay.
Player who's 11% rostered. That is Kadarius Callaway, Old Dominion running back. They get App State this week. They're home. App State is a bottom 3 rush defense in the country, almost regardless of how you slice it, in terms of explosive rush rate, in terms of success rate on a down-to-down basis. Callaway is not really getting more than 12 or 13 touches a game. It doesn't seem to matter. 7.8 yards per carry last week, over 200 rushing yards against Marshall the week before, which is a very solid rush defense. I think Callaway's kind of got the goods. Yeah, he's splitting time, absolutely, with Wicks, but I love this matchup for him. I really do. That's the only thing that the Old Dominion offense has working for them, and I think that Callaway's a really solid streamer.
Yeah, he's an intriguing player. We talked about him the week after the Marshall game, and the fact that he had only had 5 carries up until that game, and he ended up with his season high of 12. I watched that whole game and talked about the fact that all 3 of his touchdowns were over 50 yards, and he's a big guy that has speed, and ended up having to look him up. He's one of the East Mississippi JUCO products who was a former commit to Alabama, who I was just guessing by the time he was ready to go back to Alabama, they had already filled his spot and didn't need him anymore. So he's taken the Old Dominion route to get back to the Division I level, and it's these last couple of games have been proving that. I've talked to my son. My son grabbed him in a dynasty league, thinking like he won't be at Old Dominion next year. He's going to be one of those guys you see transfer
Maybe
that
not.
you could probably earmark to grab in a dynasty league, hoping he ends up in a bigger role even somewhere else, that more prominent school. So we'll see what happens. But our big curiosity was, will he repeat the 12 carries instead of just reverting to the 2 or 3? And it looks like the pattern is there. I think they followed that up with an 11 carry game the next game they had. So it seems to be gaining some consistency in Callaway. So that's he's an intriguing guy, but a good pick too.
I like that background. I did not know a lot of that.
Yeah. I was just the fact that he only had 5 carries and then looked like he did, as good as he did. Since I watched that whole game, I had to find out where'd he come from out of the blue, and so it's always interesting when you find the JUCO guys.
He was an athlete. I did not realize that he was an athlete commit to Alabama. That helps.
Right.
Good.
Yep.
Good to know.
Yep. So Willie, we filled the air there so you could take more time.
No, I appreciate that because let's see, because you put Callaway over on my spot, which that I'm gonna take that out of there.
Oh,
Yeah.
right. Sorry about that. Okay.
So speaking of that, Marshall, and you were talking about Marshall's giving up big plays, and I think you said that they did it again this week, if I'm not mistaken.
That's
So
been their weak point. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, until they figure out, what that's going to be, especially on the back end and getting rid of these long runs, we'll take a chance on Kalen Black from James Madison.
Yep.
He's 11% owned. Let me pull up his. I had my other notes here. I didn't have his.
He's
things
on
in
my
front of
list.
me,
So I'll help you out. He's
Appreciate it.
averaging 16. He had 29.3 last week, which included 3 TDs, and 2 of them were on receptions, which was interesting. And he's also been consistent with only 1 game under 12 and a half, I think. So he's got a pretty solid floor with a really high ceiling.
Right. So what I'm banking on it, since Marshall is giving some longer plays, that he at least gets one of those and finally gets over the 100-yard mark. And like I say, if we can get in that end zone, that's lovely in itself. So
right. No, that's should be a fun game also. So that's Thursday. That's one of the weekday games there, guys. Thursday night, and we need Marshall to bounce back. So it looks like I'm going to finish off my roster here. So I will, just so he's not the last pick, because I feel like he's deserving of better than that. And I know nothing of him except for his stats.
Hey, you do have Noah Smith on there
Taylor
twice. Just so you notice.
Jeremy.
Oh.
You do have an open running back spot, I think, because Noah Smith's on there twice.
Oh, okay. So this isn't okay. Good. Oops. Oh yeah. Okay. I don't know how that happened. All right. Thanks. So all right. Well, then I'll still stick with my pick, and then I'll save the quarterback. I'll give Cole Taylor a shot here at tight end. He's 5% owned from West Virginia. They're playing Oklahoma State, who, according to Fantrax, is really bad against tight ends, 127th. And my theme here, despite his kind of 8.8 points per game, he's had 11 plus in 3 of his last 4. So West Virginia, hasn't been, a horrible team. They're solid. And Cole Taylor seems to, be one of their go-to guys, or an emerging go-to guy there at tight end. So I'm gonna take him and just hope he can get me 9 or 10 points. That's That's all I'm looking for at tight end, please.
All right, I'll get him. I'll get him, man. Go ahead.
All right, and then so running back. Got to finish this out strong, guys. And my top four are gone. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't want to take. All right, I'm gonna take a guy that I mentioned at the end of last week, and I know he's playing a tough defense, but it's Alex Teza from Navy. He was a holdover that I mentioned was on my list last week that nobody took, but somebody to keep an eye out on. He ended up, having another solid game with 15 points last week after having 26 the week before. So the last 2 weeks, he's been really strong. He had fewer carries. I am a little worried about that. He only had 6 carries, but he ended up with 75 yards on those 6 carries and a touchdown. And his 3-week average for carries is still 15. So I'm not overly concerned about that. And I love the way, that Navy runs the ball. So I'm going to go Alex Teza from Navy, even though they're playing a tough Air Force defense. I think the volume will still end up being there this week for him. They're going to need it.
Yeah, that should be a decent game there. I'll probably end up watching that one.
Yep.
Okay, so yeah, these things are getting tight here.
I like that. I'm going to get my quarterback by default. We'll see how many I have left when it gets back to me.
You have a guy here in green, so I think I'll go that route. We're gonna go. We'll take a chance here, and we're gonna go Nick Anderson from Oklahoma,
Okay.
wide receiver. He's 12% owned. We were talking with them having the injury that the others are going to have to step up. Nick is their touchdown guy. I want to say he has 6 on the season. So they're going to have to spread it around a little bit more. So I would imagine that his targets are going to get an uptick. So let's take a chance.
Which receiver was it that's hurt, Willie? Do you remember? So you
Is
texted
it
me
Andrew
yesterday.
Anthony?
Yeah, Anthony. Yeah,
Okay.
that's it.
Yeah,
he's out for
Anthony.
the season.
Just wanted to get that in there so people
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
who
Sorry.
who
Yeah.
we're talking about. That's good.
Yeah. So with that, Anthony was I want to say he was the highest targeted. So he has 27 receptions on the year, 36 targets, but he only had the 1 touchdown. So Anderson is the touchdown guy. So like I said, I imagine that his targets should creep up. I mean, everything just can't go to Stoops. And
Right.
I know Farouk is there too, but Nick obviously is that guy when they get inside the 20. That's for sure.
All right. There you go. Chris, I'll give you a clue. You don't have to go quarterback here. You can save it.
And I will not go quarterback here. I've been back and forth on where I want to go here. I'm gonna go with a player who was really hot to begin the season. Had a down week last week, all things considered. It was a tough matchup, or I guess 2 weeks ago technically, because they had a bye. Give me Georgia Tech wide receiver Eric Singleton. He's rostered in 16% of leagues. I love this matchup against Boston College for them. Prior to their game against Miami, I mean, he'd been just killer. 18.5 points, 15 points, 20.7 points, 15.9 points. He's getting at least like the majority, the wide receiver 1 targets for the Yellow Jackets. I think this is a game where he can rebound really nicely. I had a lot of wide receivers too, so it was tough picking between them. So I think Singleton's the guy that I want to roll with.
Yeah, we'll get a couple of those other names when we finish up. I'll be interested. I've got quite a few left over as well, so we won't spend a lot of time on it, but at least get a couple of other names that you were considering when we come back around to the conclusion. So we'll let Kyle finish off his team here then.
I also had a bunch of wide receivers left, and I'm still questioning which one I'm going to take, but I think I'm leaning Lewis Bond, the Boston College wide receiver. 15.5, 21.1, and 19.9 in the last 4 weeks. Before last week, he really had a bad game, but it was against Army, and those service academies tend to give teams fits. I think he'll bounce back against a Georgia Tech defense that's not particularly great against the pass, and hopefully that works out for me. And then tight end. I feel like I'm screwed here. I wish
in that Army game, he.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Kyle. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I feel like I'm screwed at tight end here. I wish Willie had taken Holden Willis as a tight end, and then one of these guys could have dropped another. Gosh,
For his
this is
strategy might have
just
worked there to at least frustrate him.
this is disgusting.
I only put
I'm between.
4 tight ends on my list, and I took 2 of them. So
Yeah, I have a bunch of guys that I liked in the preseason, but they really haven't broken out. They haven't really done anything, and I guess I'm just going to close my eyes and hold my breath. And I'll take San Jose State tight end Dominic Mazzotti. Roster in just 9% of leagues. Been pretty disappointing, honestly, but I think I can get 5 points to supplement the rest of my roster. So playing against the Utah State team that's been pretty bad against the pass, so hopefully he can do something. But
right, and if Olsen's hurt, he's still the only tight end that they'll focus on. Even though you would think he would have more targets recently, but you got better chances with Olsen being banged up. His counterpart there at San Jose State. I like that Kyle's aiming low. It's just wants 5 points at tight end though.
Well, I wanted 10, but then the 3 guys who could get 10 got drafted. So.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is you had Chris and I, who only had 3 on our list, so we got lucky, I guess, to get the ones we got, since Willie took 2 of the 3 we had, and all of yours were gone as well. So that shows you all, like, you better jump on Knox, Mateer, and Willis is what it sounds like, because I'm not super confident in mine either. Much more confident than Kyle is. I might end up with the 8 points that my guy's averaging is all. So I'll be happy if I get that 8. But all right, Chris, who are you going to grab to leave me with at quarterback?
I've been back and forth a lot on this, mostly because I think there's a lot of good options at quarterback this week. But the guy I'm going to go with is someone who I think has slowed down a little bit from his early season pace, but I still believe he can get it done, and that is Rice quarterback JT Daniels. I love this matchup against Tulsa this week. It's early in the week, so make sure that you're picking him up and slide him into your lineup. But this Tulsa defense against the pass is bottom 5 in my estimation, 128th in success rate, 119th in explosiveness and EPA per play. Just a pretty rough defensive unit in a secondary that just doesn't have a lot of experience. I mean, a lot of young corners there. So I'm going back to the JT Daniels which, does that feel great? No, definitely not. But I do think he's going to be good this week. I really do.
Wow. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about him this week and missed him being, that low. But, I think it makes sense. I've got McCaffrey in a few leagues, so he's looked good.
Oh, yeah.
That receiver, yeah. Okay, Willie. How are you going to finish up here?
Boy, this is rough out here.
Well, Kyle and I have plenty of receivers if you need our advice.
Well, I need a running back, so.
Oh, well, okay, never mind then.
Yeah. No, I don't need any receivers at this point.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm gonna go with this guy. I know I said I wasn't going to do it earlier, but it's getting rough, and they play FAU. We're going to give Robert Henry a chance
Thought about him.
from UTSA.
Okay.
1% owned,
Uh-huh.
but he's had he's had 9 carries, 11 carries, and then 9 carries again last week. 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games. So let's give him a shot. They play FAU,
Okay.
who Fantrax serves 69th against the run. So why not? There was another one I wanted to, but LJ Martin was taken last week, and we saw what happened there. I
From
mean,
BYU.
he did get 11 and a half, but yeah, I would hope that I could at least get that,
From Robert
um,
Henry.
yeah, from Robert this week. So
Okay.
let's take that shot.
Um,
Wow.
and Pavia's out there still, or is he over? Is he over 30?
No, you're
Willie?
good. He's
No,
26.
he's not over.
All
I
right. So I'm not.
I almost took him, but
I
Yeah,
did too.
I didn't like the matchup. That's probably why others strayed away from him too. He's playing UTEP, which seems to be pretty tough against quarterbacks. Vadiato from Middle Tennessee is playing Liberty. That's one that I'd consider, but I think there are better options. And so I'm really down to Chandler Rogers, who I really liked at North Texas, going against Tulane though. And I'm Willie's kind of steered me against anybody playing against Tulane. So I think I'm going to go Garrett Green, one of this week's top 2 QBs, if I'm not mistaken, in overall performance. He's 11% owned. He's playing Oklahoma State, who's pretty weak against the pass, and his average, which is 23 points a game, is really more skewed than all of the other guys I was telling you about today, because it includes a week 3 injury game where he only had 0.1 point. So his true average to me would really be 28 and a half in the games he played, all of the games, because he went out so early in week 3 with the injury. So, in that regard, I don't think Garrett Green's a fluke in terms is he going to get 40 plus like he did this week? No. But against Oklahoma State, I think he's a guy that could approach 30 points. He's averaging 28 and a half in 4 games. So I like Garrett Green a lot. And, I don't know if that he would have gotten on my radar this week if it wasn't for the Oklahoma State or for the game that he just had. But yeah, he's on the radar, and I think he should be on other people's radar for being better than what that average is really showing. So with that, really quick, we'll do kind of a rapid fire round. Who are the quarterbacks you each had now that we know? And Kyle, we'll limit you to 3, but yeah, Willie, who are the 2 you had left?
I still had Joey Aguilar from App State.
App State, okay, and Pavia.
And well, I was not going to take Pavia only because of the UTEP, but I had the green on Jordan McLeod.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, from JMU. Yeah, he's actually he was actually on mine. I missed him. He was buried under another guy. Yeah, Chris,
Yeah.
who were your guys?
Fowler Nicolosi, the Colorado State quarterback, going against UNLV.
Okay.
I thought that was a
Mhm.
pretty good matchup.
Yeah, he needs to bounce back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I also had Pavia. I had a
Okay.
pretty short list this week. All the guys got taken except for Fowler Nicolosi and Pavia.
Okay, and Kyle, yeah, who were a couple of the ones that stand out that might have been your next runner-ups? That you had.
Nicolosi and McLeod were like the 2 that I was really considering, and then I had a couple like deep sleepers on here just for no reason. One of those was Avery Johnson, the Kansas State quarterback who rushed for 5 touchdowns
Okay.
last week. I don't think they're going to put him back in the box, so I think he could start this week.
K-State.
Yeah, and then Josh Hoover, the TCU quarterback who attempted like 55 passes against BYU last week.
Wow. Okay, those are good. Yeah, Avery Johnson's going to be interesting. The K-State quarterback. I didn't see that game, so I had to go back and kind of see how he was the number 1 producing quarterback in all of CFF this week, and I had to see how it happened. I thought maybe Howard ended up hurt and he played the whole game. As it turns out, he ended up playing the entire second half, but really in split time during the first half and that second half, he ended up getting 5 rushing touchdowns, which was crazy. And he's a true freshman, so
Yeah,
definitely
he's a hell of an
somebody for your
athlete.
radar. Yeah, it looks like it. And I didn't
Tiny
get to
kid
see
though, really small.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very intriguing. Yeah, I want to tune in and see this guy, but sounds like a definite dynasty prospect for those guys that have dynasties without huge rosters where he might be available, or it looked like he was unrostered in quite a few of the leagues I was in. So we might want to go get him, not just for this week, but for the future if you guys are in those dynasties. Then we'll go through this way. Just do one more that stands out from your list that. Is any other position besides quarterback. We'll go to you, Chris. Do you have one other that kind of would be your almost made it into the lineup guy?
I'm going to cheat because I'm going to give you two that I was very, very torn between. I know I'm already breaking the rule. I apologize.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Okay, that's fine.
I thought Jalen Lucas might have gone, the Indiana running back. I know that he's taken a step back a little bit in recent weeks, but I've said this before. I took him in our week 2 draft, and he was excellent. Every time he steps on the field, he's the fastest guy on there. Just really, really talented player. And then there were a couple wide receivers that I was really, really torn with. And the guy that I almost went with and didn't was Lawrence Keys from Tulane. He had a so-so week last week, but I think he's a very solid player. And I think that he could have a big week in a matchup that North Texas defense is horrendous. I'm talking like bottom 10 unit in the country. So I think Lawrence Keys is a really nice streamer.
Yeah, and he's one of those guys that I've got. My note on him is that he's just been really steady. He's probably not going to be the game breaker guy, but he's going to get you that 12 to 16 if you're really in a pinch and need a guy that's just going to make sure he can get you double digits. So, all right, Kyle, what about you? The non quarterback that almost made it.
Well, I don't think I was super considering him, but the guy who surprised me that didn't go was the standout performance of last week, the Stanford wide receiver, Alec Ayomanor, who had 18 targets last week and went for 295 yards against Colorado. I think it was a flash in the pan, but I was surprised nobody went and chased those points.
Yeah, well, that is interesting, and he's worth mentioning. The guy's 2% owned. He has the second best, according to our notes, the second best fantasy performance of any position all season behind Giddens, the running back from Kansas State. And I guess we just all agreed with you. Like, when you go from nothing to that big of a game, I think, we're probably all in general just a little scared that, he could end up like Giddens, which, kind of went from a 61-point game, never to return, I think, into the 20s, from, if I'm not mistaken. But but he's still one that, again, if he's there and there are fewer, a lot of these guys aren't there, he's probably worth a dice roll, because he's clearly on the radar now for us and Stanford's quarterback. Willie, what about you? One last guy.
Well, I mean, the reason why I didn't take him is, like I said, before we start, I didn't want to have another Sean Brown situation. So that's kind of why I just stayed clear. But the guy that probably would have been the next up was going to be Malachi Fields from Virginia.
Okay.
He's been decent. Let's see, he's been in double digits the last 5 games. So and only scored in the last 2. So that would have been the guy. And let's see, the other one was intriguing to me. I thought is going to be Brandon Presley. I think I was telling you, Oklahoma State has finally decided that they want to name some starters, and he's one of them. So he had 28.5 against Kansas. So and he's getting the targets, and now we're in pure Big 12 play. So they'll be slinging that ball every week. So
and you don't have a depth chart full of oars.
Right.
And Deshaun Stripling is out for the season, so
that's another good point to tag on to that.
Point.
That's a good point. The one I'll mention, and then we'll wrap this thing up, is and he's been kind of bubbling he's been on the bubble, I should say, for a couple of weeks, is Theo Weiss from Missouri. Even though he's wide receiver 2 there seems to be enough to go around, and he's still been getting fed the ball quite a bit.
Burden got hurt. Did he end up coming back in?
I'm
Yeah,
not
he
sure. I
came
didn't
back
know
in and
that.
then
So I,
didn't
I
record
I
another
I
stat.
think he did.
Okay.
okay.
He got hit in the
Um,
nards and then came back in eventually and didn't do anything after that.
okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, what I like is even with Burden on the team, he's had 28 targets in the last 3 games, and 28, 18, and 19 were his points. So again, even don't let the fact that he's a wide receiver two fool you. We know from teams in the past, or even Washington this year, a couple guys can be fantasy relevant at the same time at the wide receiver spot. So don't let that let you shy away from Theo Weiss because they're playing South Carolina, who's not very good on defense either.
Okay.
So with
Thanks for
that,
rubbing it in.
sorry about that. With that, I'll let everybody have some parting shots. And Chris, let us know. Do you got the big play for the week? What's the big small school play for the week?
Most of the small school lines have not come out yet, but I will tell you
Okay.
that you need to be paying attention to the wind in the middle of the country this week because we might have some wind situations in Lincoln, Nebraska,
Okay.
in Manhattan, Kansas, potentially in Columbia, Missouri. So make sure that
Okay.
you're dialed in because I think those games could get a little weird with the passing volume. So that's my biggest takeaway.
All right.
Now you got me checking my quarterback real quick.
Kyle, we'll catch you on Debbie Dose.
Yes, sir. And a big go Vols this week as we take on Alabama on Saturday. So big game for us.
I'll be rooting for the Vols also. All right, guys. Really appreciate it. Good luck. And we're not going to put a gun to your head, but if you make it to the top 2 of this round of 6, we hope that you would both come back and compete again in the finals. So good luck on that end.
I'll defend any title I have. I'll do it. I'll be here.
I like that. I
All
like
right.
that.
And with that, I've talked enough. So Willie B, any final thoughts?
No, thank you guys for being here, and thank everyone for watching and listening. Good luck this week.